Ora viva a todos, bem-vindos a mais uma edição do Primeiro Tempo, o podcast do Rugido Verde para leões com raça. Vamos então, tal como prometido, continuar a conversa com Pippo Russo e esperemos que tenha o mesmo interesse esta segunda parte como teve a primeira parte desta conversa com o sociólogo e jornalista Pippo Russo. Acompanhem-nos então para mais uma série de perguntas e um diálogo interessantíssimo com esta personalidade do mundo do jornalismo e do futebol.
Thank you. So it's kind of a similar theme of not just Vieira, but also, I don't want to call him your friend. I know he's not your friend, Jorge Mendes.
Yes.
Because you talk a lot about him. So it seems like, from my point of view, in Portugal, not just the sporting powers, but the political powers and the social media even are very submissive to Jorge Mendes. That guy is a god to them in Portugal. How can he and Gestifoot exert so much influence to get that kind of protection from both political, sporting, and social media powers when everybody else does not enjoy the same benefits?
I think that Jorge Mendes give an high importance to what I name propaganda, not only information, right propaganda. He's really attentive to his image. He's really attentive with the relation with press. We have not to forget that Gestifoot is full of former journalists, and this is a sign of which is the attention of Jorge Mendes concerning communication and propaganda. And of course, we can't deny that Gestifoot is one of the most important players in the global football concerning the transfer market. But a lot of this image is propaganda because Jorge Mendes is really attentive. And one of the reasons why he is so respected and loved by Portuguese press is maybe that Portugal as a small country is so attentive to his national champions, and this is one explanation. Another explanation is that Jorge Mendes is a person that in some manner give international exposition to football, to Portuguese football. And this is a thing that for Portuguese press, Portuguese media is important. And above all, there are the personal relations, and Jorge Mendes, in this specific side, we have to recognize that he's really, really, really good. He's really able to run personal relations, and not only with Portuguese journalists. I can testify that also with Italian journalists is really able to run personal relations.
And if we look at the last year's list of the biggest agents and intermediaries in football, we see that Jorge Mendes was the second. Gareth Bale is now the first, which I found super interesting. But then we have a whole lot of agents that are actually faring very well in terms of income. Doesn't it sound interesting and funny, I would say, at the same time, that there's a lot of people showing up on those lists that seem to be somehow connected to Gestifoot and Mensch. So could they be kind of satellite people to divert some of the money to other places other than Gestifoot?
I think that Gestifoot is a great player in the football transfer market. This is not the best moment in his history, and this is not the best moment for George Mendes. And as you said, the last report by Forbes informed us that the most rich, the most income agency is Stellar Group. But we have not to see only to the income. I insist that we need to see at the level of power, the power of a super agent. And with attention to this specific side of the problem, I think that in any time, recent or more old, the most powerful agent is the world remain Pinizavi.
All right, and from do you think it's possible? Well, the man will get older, as we all do, unfortunately. But do you think it's possible that a new agent or an actual group can work in Portugal without Jorge Mendes, at least in the short and medium term, where he seems to have the full control of agency in Portugal?
I think that the right question is the power system that made possible to Jorge Mendes to become the most powerful agent in Portugal and then in the world could give possibility to another agent to take off and escalate the position of Jorge Mendes, because this is, in my opinion, the real question. We have to not forget that when Jorge Mendes started, Portugal had another highly powerful agent that was José Veiga. And when José Veiga was the most powerful agent in Portugal, there was the opinion that nobody in Portugal could fight against José Veiga and could overturn José Veiga. But this happened. And this happened because someone or lot of persons, some powerful person decided that Jorge Mendes was to become the most powerful agent in Portugal, and at the same time that José Veiga was to be put out of the field. And we need to ask ourselves if in Portugal there are mature time for a succession, for a substitution in power for Jorge Mendes. I think that this is not still the right moment, but in the same way, I think that the right moment will arrive, and not in so long time. This is my opinion.
Definitely. And Sabino, before I move back to you, let me just ask one more question. I think this is one everybody wants to hear, which is, what do you think was the role of Jorge Mendes in what happened in Alcochete? And by that I mean when the players unilaterally canceled their contracts, basically. What do you think was his role in having the players move from the club?
But I think that Jorge Mendes, directly or not, was involved in all moving of the players that resolved their contract with Sporting after Alcochete. And those are the facts. Of course, we can't speculate no more because it's really a delicate matter, a delicate question. But what we can say is that for sure Jorge Mendes was the person that had the higher gain in the situation that created after the Alcochete matter.
Thank you, and I appreciate your input. Sabino, do you want to go next?
So before we go more into the role of Mendes in the attack in the Sporting Academy, you wrote a book about him, about his role, which I strongly recommend to everybody that's going to listen to this podcast. It gives us really a clear picture of. Many people don't know that he was well, I'll be very polite. He was the manager of a disco in the north of Portugal, in a town called Caminha. That's how his professional career started, which is far away from what we think are the credentials for one of the most famous football agents in the world. But is a bit of the way how he operates, and I want you to comment on these two of his most famous businesses or deals, which were two players from Benfica, Renato Sanches and João Félix. That the modus operandi was basically similar. They play for Benfica, they get a lot of commercial on the Portuguese press, probably sponsored by Gestifute. Somehow that hype gets into the international press, and then these players are sold for a value way above of what realistically, if you watch the game of those players and how they play, realistically what they are worth it. How does that... how he manages to pull that one off? I mean, I understand the influence he has on the Portuguese press and so on, but at international level, how can he sell players that are overvalued according to what realistically it's their value?
And this is the part of the question that we are not able to reply, because, of course, the propaganda that I named is important in Portugal for Mendes, and both examples that you mentioned are really showing which is the level of propaganda, because two normal football players were transformed into global phenomenon, but when they go out of Portugal, showed that they were not phenomenon. But concerning why foreign clubs was so anxious to buy those two players, we have to take in account that João Félix was bought by Atletico Madrid, that historically is a club in excellent relations with Jorge Mendes, and I add that the formula, the financial scheme for buying João Félix is really a mysterious scheme, because practically for 3/4 he was the transfer was financed by 23 Capital. And concerning the relation between Jorge Mendes and 23 Capital, I think we need to more in deep investigate. Concerning the transfer of Renato Sanches to Bayern Monaco, this was a period, it was a passage, an historical passage where Bayern was in excellent relations with Jorge Mendes, and I offered an interpretation that Bayern, and especially Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, was so anxious to set up the Super League, European Super League project, Super League for club, and Jorge Mendes was seen as a precious ally. And this is why, in my opinion, Bayern Monaco did a so expensive and crazy, I can underline, transfer. But when we talk about Jorge Mendes, we talk exactly of a situation in which football player transfer are not only football player transfer, but are also some other things, are power, not only football.
Yeah, and about power, which is a key word, actually, a good segue to the topic that you just discussed with Simão, which is Mendes had absolutely zero power in our club in Sporting for a quite important number of years while the previous president was there. He obviously regretted that, as he saw there was a lot of potential money that he could make from a number of players that were playing in Sporting. And as soon as the attack in the academy happens, he appears in the shadow, and obviously to those that are following the process, is one thing is clear. He's one of those that benefited more from the attack in the academy, as he was able to settle some very interesting deals, some of them with players that canceled their contracts, and that the current board of directors of Sporting negotiated with Mendes. What do you see the power of Mendes currently in Sporting? I mean, is he really, he broke that capsule, which was Sporting, and now he really plays an important role in the way how Sporting deals and transfers players?
I think that nowadays Jorge Mendes control in some way the transfer politic of Sporting, and we had a lot of example in recent football market of Sporting. But I think that the most humiliating situation for Sporting fans is that for Jorge Mendes, Sporting Clube of Portugal is a province and the capital is Benfica. And this is, in my opinion, really humiliating. Sporting fans doesn't deserve this, and I hope that they will return days in which football fans of Sporting could be proud not only of their team on the pitch, but also of their representative outside the pitch. This is not the situation nowadays, unfortunately.
Well, using I really like that metaphor of saying that Sporting is currently a province of the real power, which is Benfica. I would call it that. I would say that right now Sporting is the Sancho Panza of Don Quixote.
Exactly,
at the moment.
Exactly.
That's the role that I see it doing. How come? I don't know how well do you know how the current president is doing, but it's difficult to understand how come a person like Varandas, which clearly displays no capacity to be president of the club, how come he gets to power? Is this something that you have an opinion about?
No. Varandas, of course, is not a fit person to run a great club as Sporting Portugal in a complex situation like is the situation of Sporting Portugal. As you know, always an estimator of Bruno de Carvalho for the first 4 years of his presidency. I didn't understand a lot of things of what he did in the fifth year of this president, and what he did in this year was the starting point of the end of Sporting, and this was the situation why persons like Varandas, but we have also to remember Sousa Sintra. Person like this became the head of Sporting, but this is really the darkest middle age of Sporting now, and I hope that this situation will go to an end. I don't know when, I don't know how will be possible, but I really hope that those days will finish.
Yeah. Before going back to Simão, I would just like to try, if you could be more specific, what do you think specifically that the previous president did on this final year of mandate before he was basically sent away from the club?
I think that he became to act wrong when he imposed to the General Assembly the modification of the statutes with the pretension that 75% of socios was to vote for him. This was really an imposition that I didn't understood. Sporting Clube of Portugal, like other clubs, are an expression of democracy and are not an autocratic institution. And then I think that really the day when the situation in the presidency of Bruno de Carvalho gone wrong was the night of the match in Europa League with Atletico Madrid. I really didn't understand why Bruno de Carvalho attacked the players, the team. To be defeated in the pitch of Atletico Madrid was normal. I really didn't understood why Bruno de Carvalho did this, and it was the point where the fandom given a position defiantly against Bruno de Carvalho. Until that moment, the situation was favorable to Bruno de Carvalho. And that night, that I insist, I really can't understand why Bruno de Carvalho acted this way, but that night was the beginning of the end of the best moment of Sporting in recent past.
Simão, I think you want to follow up on this, no?
Yeah, I think I'll definitely follow up on this. My opinion, I've stated many times before, but probably you didn't hear. So very quickly, I think that there was some unbalance in Bruno's second term as a president, so the last year. But at the same time, it is my opinion that a lot of what happened was not just because of that imbalance that he had, but mostly because of the constant attacks he was victim by social media, by even internal, let's call it the internal enemy, because he was being attacked left and right from his own team and members of the own cabinet. So do you agree with this analysis, or do you think there's even more behind it?
I insist on one point. Bruno de Carvalho had a lot of enemies, and this was also the profile of his presidents, because Bruno de Carvalho was a man against, and this for a long time was his strength, was his point of strength. But in the last year, this was the point of weakness. And I add, it's true that Bruno de Carvalho had a lot of enemies, both outside Sporting Clube of Portugal and inside Sporting Clube of Portugal. But in the same time, Bruno de Carvalho has been one of the most loved presidents in Sporting Clube de Portugal. And this situation was totally favorable for him. And so what I say and what I repeatedly underline is that it's true that Bruno de Carvalho had a lot of enemies, but in the right moment, in the moment when all happened, the worst enemy of Bruno de Carvalho was the same Bruno de Carvalho.
All right, and then from probably more of a personal, subjective manner. You met with Bruno in the Future of Football conference. And yes. If I may ask, of course, I know it's more of a personal subject, but what is your opinion of him as a person? Not as a president, as a person. Does he seem to be a fair person? Does he seem to be a tough person?
I can say that I, for Bruno de Carvalho, maintain a great affection. Maybe it's exaggerate to say that we are friends, because friendship is a serious thing, and I meet Bruno de Carvalho 2 or 3 times, so it's exaggerate to say we are friends. But of course, we were in good relation. We was in good relation, and we remain in good relations. Of course, we are not so frequently in contact. But if I have to evaluate the role as a president, I need to keep apart the evaluation as a person and as a friend. I have to evaluate what he did as a president, and I repeat, for the first 4 years, he was a great president. He reinstated Sporting Clube de Portugal at the elite of the football in Portugal, and also in good place in European football. In the 5th year, I can really understand why he did so.
Sorry, and from now a different kind of perspective, the MP in Portugal basically said there's no proof, no substantial, not even circumstantial proof that Bruno was the moral instigator, let's call it, in Alcochete. Was this what you were expecting, that he actually didn't do it, that he wasn't responsible for what happened?
I don't agree with this interpretation. I can't believe that Bruno de Carvalho was only for the moral level the instigator. Bruno de Carvalho in that moment was in a big moment of tension. He missed some communication. He exaggerated some communication. But what I can remember, because I followed strictly that moment of Sporting, what I can remember is that the moment in those days was a moment of high tension around Sporting, and what happened was a consequence of this high tension.
Mm-hmm. And just before I move back to Sabino,
to complement that, okay. If I may, what we're seeing and what we've seen in the past is that, and that's the irony of things. As you mentioned, Bruno de Carvalho had at least 90% of his mandate was for the Sporting fans, at least of most of them, was recognized as an excellent performance as a president. But then you had the press particularly in Portugal, constantly trying to undermine his work, undervalue his merits, and attack him either as president or either as a person. Now we have a new president of Sporting, which by all evidences is doing basically a terrible job, and he has the press praising him for every little thing that he does. So it's really irony of times that you have this contradiction, and that the press is leading or is trying to format the opinion of the Sporting supporters.
It is a paradox. Of course, Bruno de Carvalho, because essentially was a man against, was also a man against not the press, but a certain way the press act. And his style of communication was so highly intentional, and this is why for more and more increasingly part of the press, Bruno de Carvalho was not a good man, was not treated as he deserved. And in confront with Bruno de Carvalho, Varandas is a so polite man. Nobody could be afraid of Frederico Varandas, and nobody could have polemics with Frederico Varandas, and this is a perfect character for the press.
Yeah, it is not only a perfect character, but they even try to cover up whenever the evidences go against him. I'll give you an example which is recent and probably will not have the same appeal in a few weeks or months, which is basically we saw the case where the TAD gave reason to Sporting on the case against the player Rafael Leão, one of the players that cancelled the contract on the aftermath of the Alcochete attack. And we saw basically two things. We saw Varandas' testimony, which basically tried the utmost that Sporting, the club that he is president, to lose the case. His testimony is against his own club, and he also did deals, particularly with Mendes, with some of the other significant players that cancelled their contracts. Terrible deals for Sporting, but where Mendes did excellent deals in terms of commissions. So it's. Let me ask you: were you surprised that one of the players lost the case in the TAB, and now he has to pay 16 million?
No. I was not surprised. I was not surprised because things were evident, and in my opinion, this is another demonstration of the unfitted person that is Frederico Varandas. I think that sooner or later justice is done, and the case of Rafael Leão is a demonstration that in some time justice is done. But this is another example of the bad application, the bad acting of Frederico Varandas.
Mm-hmm. Within the same line, so that Varandas could do such a bad job, and he did a similar job, by the way, when he went to testimony, when he went to court in the process that was judging not only Bruno Carvalho but all the other intervenients in the attack of the academy. He did also a very sad and a ridiculous statements in court. But let me leave this question to basically conclude for my side at least the case of the attack on the academy. Do you think that, and particularly on the case of Bruno de Carvalho, I mean, the fact that he was involved in the case, it's begs belief in accordance to to the lack of evidence of his participation. But the fact that he was not only involved in the case, he was arrested for testimony on a Sunday evening, when there was no chance that he could be released on the next few days because there was a strike of in the judicial system. So there was a whole setup made for the TVs to humiliate him, to make sure that he would stay a few days in jail. Is this the judiciary system serving the tabloids, or are the tabloids commanding the judiciary system?
But I can say that absolutely Bruno de Carvalho was not well treated by justice, by the tabloid. But we can return to the case of Rui Pinto. In some aspect, it was the same way to act by justice, by press. Was not a benevolent attitude for the most part of press and for the general part of justice. I think that absolutely Bruno de Carvalho didn't deserve this treatment.
Yeah, and what is your comment when a commentator, a journalist, a companion of profession in Portugal says that the attack to the academy was a terrorist attack compared to 9/11?
Oh, this is ridiculous, but and I don't want to know which was the journalist, but I think that we as journalists have the duty to be in any time conscious of our social responsibility. And our social responsibility is above all on what we express and on the word that we use. And those are not words that the journalist have to use, especially when he speaks in public.
Yeah, agree completely. Before going back to Simão and just to basically close this part and of related to sporting, and as we are already heading to the end of this very nice conversation, the current situation of sporting, many of the fans and supporters are afraid that the football, the società, will be sold to a private interest. That is the ultimate goal of the current president. Do you think that this is a possible outcome for sporting?
I'm afraid that this is possible because the situation of sporting is not so clear, is not so good, and I underline that Frederico Varandas was to turn the thing better, and this doesn't seem to have happened. And so they will present the passage of ownership of sporting in the hands of a private group as an inevitable situation. I think that this could be a strategy, not casual.
Mm-hmm. Clear. Simão, do you want to go ahead for the final set of questions?
Yeah, we have only, let's say, a couple more questions. I just want to clear, when Sabino grabbed the conversation, I was talking, so it's on the recording, but I was muted, so it's, you couldn't hear me, but it's on the recording. I just wanted to clear, Sabino didn't cut me off. He's not rude. Anyway, now, moving away from Bruno and Mendes and well, kind of connected, but not about them specifically, and kind of to round off our whole conversation. With this pandemic, do you think, I'm not talking about the society in general, but in football, do you think we'll see any fundamental changes on how football works, how agents work, how investment funds work, or is it just really going to be exactly the same and we just move on business as usual?
I think that we are at risk because we are so concentrated in the top level of football, and the top level of football will survive with some problem, but will survive. But if we see to the lower level of football, from the second to the lower division, there are a lot of realities, a lot of football teams and football society that are at risk to disappear. And this will be a great chance for investment funds, for investors, also for criminal organization to buy clubs. And we need really to take attention of this, really.
Got it. And from still kind of related but not pandemic related, and to round off the conversation we had, what's your opinion on the penalty? Yeah, that's the right word. Applied to Manchester City in regards to European competition, and when can we see that actually happen with all the delays that occurred?
Yes. I think that was a right penalty. I can say that cynically, I was not sure that UEFA had the courage to punish a big club like Manchester City. I mean, I was sure that UEFA could show muscles again, small club or medium club, but I was not sure that UEFA had the strengthness to punish a rich and powerful club. And instead, UEFA did it. And so I was surprised. I was also happy to be surprised, and I hope that when all the circus will restart, this situation will be maintained, that the sanction against Manchester City will be confirmed by CAS, and this is a passage to give more cleaning in football, more sustainability, economic sustainability in football.
I can definitely agree, and I was as amazed as you are that UEFA actually did something about this, actually did something about what we could all see.
Yes.
Sabino, as you opened today's podcast, I'll have you close. Have any final questions?
Okay.
And then we can say goodbye.
I just have two final questions that I would like to make. One that I think are very related to the moment that we are living. I would like to have people's comment on the fact that Mendes and Cristiano Ronaldo have announced publicly some donations of not only of money, material during this crisis. Do you see this as a genuine act of kindness during this period, or is there something else into it?
But I think that some other person and some other players did some things higher than what Mendes and Cristiano Ronaldo did for Portugal. I think that, of course, any donation is a positive thing, and we have to recognize this. But I think that donation and any act of solidarity need to be done in a discreet manner. It's not, solidarity, in my opinion, has not to be shown, because differently is propaganda. And I think that solidarity doesn't need to be propaganda. This is my opinion.
Yeah, Clear. And another aspect which is very recent, which has to do with the reports that we're seeing of the players from Juventus and from Barcelona accepting some, I think, approximately 70% cut on their salaries with some issues to get an agreement in Barcelona. Do you think that other clubs will follow suit? Do you think this is a sustainable thing, or do they risk losing the players?
I think that in the top level of football, any clubs relate in proportionally with the level of salaries need to do this, because it's a matter of redistribution, and footballers in the top level of football are very rich person, and they gain a lot of money, and they need to restitute. And I think and I hope in any top level of football in any country this will happen, and I underline, I hope this will happen.
Very good. Just one final question from my side, and to finish this podcast. Do you think that the championships at higher level in the main leagues will be finished, or will the seasons will be cancelled?
I hope that they will finish, because it's sport, and sport need to have a clear result, clear verdicts, because differently is not sport. And I hope that also in July, in August, the tournaments will be concluded.
Very good, perfect. Thank you very much, Pippo.
Thanks a lot for you.
Go ahead.
I'll take the opportunity to thank Pippo as well for being here with us.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me, and we will keep in touch.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Ciao. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you.